I'd like to call this meeting to order. Committee of the Whole meeting for August 18th, 2020. I'd like to welcome everybody, all the participants and everybody watching online. I'm also going to acknowledge, I'm pleased to acknowledge that we are here today on traditional territory of Treaty 6. We acknowledge all those who share a deep connection with this land. The City of Beaumont respects the histories, languages, and cultures of all of Canada's First Peoples, whether they be of First Nation, Métis, or Inuit descent, and appreciates that their presence continues to enrich Canada's vibrant communities. We are all treaty people. The peace treaties bind us all. And with that, I will move to, if I can find it, because I've now lost it, the agenda. There's always some scope for technical confusion when I'm switching between screens. There we go. Okay, so that brings us to item 2, modifications to the agenda. Are there any modifications to the agenda as published?
Thank you, Chair. Administration has no modifications to the agenda at this time.
Thank you. So in that case, I would like to ask for a committee member to move that the agenda as presented be accepted.
So moved.
Thank you. Was that Councillor Hendricks?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hendricks. All in, and we've got to use the voting buttons now, haven't we? So would you please indicate your vote using the voting buttons now? And I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that passes unanimously. 7, I beg your pardon, including me. So that passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, that brings us to item number 3, which is, as fast as I can move these screens, presentation delegations, 3A, public participation policy update. I'd like to ask Ms. Sangster or her nominee if she'll present.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Chair and committee members. I'll start here by providing a very brief overview of administration's review of the public participation policy. As background, the public participation policy was first prepared in 2012, updated in 2015, and ratified in 2018 by Council. It was last brought to Committee of the Whole in March 2019 to present new changes proposed by administration, including the addition of 2 new guiding principles, namely shared responsibility and commitment, and evaluation and continual improvement. A minor adjustment to the presentation of the roles and responsibilities in the policy, namely unnesting the project manager and communications officer bullet points under administration's role, and redesigning the supporting public participation guide to reflect the city's new branding. At that time, following discussion, Committee of the Whole directed administration to continue to review the policy and bring it back to a future meeting. Following that, in late 2019, the Public Engagement Community of Practice was established within administration to support improved public engagement practices in Beaumont. Its terms of reference include the development of an integrated public engagement system and manual with identified processes and tools, and the public participation policy was reviewed as part of this ongoing work. There are a number of specific substantive changes between the current policy and what's proposed this evening, and I'll just go through them one by one so that they're quite clear. First, adding the shared responsibility and commitment and evaluation and continual improvement principles as was proposed in 2019. Second, combining the general public and stakeholders roles into one municipal stakeholders role under roles and responsibilities to reduce duplication and recognize that the public are in fact stakeholders. 3, removing specific position titles under administration's role, recognizing that these can change, but administration's overall responsibilities remain consistent. 4th, adding more detailed text to introduce the public participation spectrum that is shown within the policy. This provides a bit more clarity on what the spectrum is and how it fits into Beaumont's public participation processes, and also emphasize that our processes include reporting back to the public. Fifth, adding the empower level of engagement to the spectrum, which corresponds fully to the International Association for Public Participation spectrum that is the internationally recognized source for this continuum. Sixth, adding a new heading on public participation processes to explicitly define the circumstances under which Beaumont will engage the public. Seventh, updating the content under the procedures heading to reference the scope of the public engagement manual that's being developed and state how it supports the policy. Also in that section, we're noting that all other relevant policies and legislation also apply, clearly state where the policy is available, and also clearly state when it will be reviewed. And finally, updating some of the language and titles under the authority heading. So overall, it's intended that this policy will continue to provide general authority and direction for public engagement in Beaumont. And the forthcoming manual, which we expect will be completed around the end of 2020, will provide the implementation details and procedures that can be more readily adapted, perhaps as needed, than the policy itself. So are there any questions on the revised policy before committee discusses and provides direction?
Councillor Barnhart, I believe, has a question.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Good. Thank you very much, Ms. Angster. I was looking forward to this coming back because I really think it's an important document and policy for us to have. So my questions are just for understanding purposes. I support the direction this is going in and really look forward to the details that are going to be in the manual. My first question was around the changes in the guiding principles. And I can't remember exactly all the conversations that we had to us first time, but there were, I'm just trying to find it again in the request for decision. I tried to scroll down and find everything. Sorry, actually in the actual document itself, in the policy, the principles that are there. So we had, I found my old copy of the one from 2012, and there were 4 guiding principles, and now we have 6, I guess it is. And I noticed that, and I think I recall we had a conversation about inclusivity and accessibility. So the word and accessibility words have been added to it. And I am just, again, maybe this is too much detail at this point, but would you be able to elaborate on whether this wording incorporates the intent of our, not just being respectful, but also reaching out? Because I think that's the point about accessibility, that I want to make sure we don't just expect people to find us, but that we reach out in different ways to find ways to find what people are thinking and feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed, that is something that is considered as part of the policy, because we recognize that there are a diversity of interests in Beaumont, and we need to be proactive in making sure that we're not just listening to the voices maybe that are more comfortable speaking or that have the resources to take part. So that's contemplated partly under the accessibility point. The other place where there's attention to that is under the evaluation and continual improvement bullet, which provides for us to be proactively, as part of all our processes, looking for ways to evaluate them, making sure that we reach the people who are most affected, the people who are most interested, and then looking for ways to systematically build those lessons into future engagement processes.
Mr. Chair, could I follow up with 2 more questions?
Sure. I don't see anybody else requesting to speak at this point, so sure, go ahead.
There's a couple of more hands raised over there in the participant bar, I think.
Oh, no, you're ahead of me, Councillor Barnhart. Mind you, that's not unusual. Oh, I see Councillor Van Newkirk. Okay, and Munkoff Swain. Okay, so yes, follow through, please, Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you. Just 2 more quick questions, I hope. In the accessibility one, just to follow up on what you said, Ms. Angster, would you also be including, and I think we do it now, Francophone translations and reaching out in French for some of our consultation?
I may need to defer to Mr. Wong or Ms. Raymond on that. I'm not sure if it's something that we have discussed specifically in the context of this evaluation. It's certainly something that could be incorporated if it emerged that there was a desire or a need for it, or if we were not reaching a demographic or a group that we should without that service provided. and I'll just give Mr. Wong or Ms. Raymond a chance to add if there's anything that should be added.
Yes, I can probably say a few words on this one. As a working group, we haven't really discussed about Francophone translations, but definitely we can prepare some literature, to be presented to the communities, because I like for live translations, it will take a little bit to work out, but definitely for literatures and mail out, for example, definitely we will consider that. And I believe that we have done that before. For example, if I remember correctly, the Centreville ARP process, the public engagement, we did have some French translations or something like that to send out because of the French Village Design Guidelines portion of it. So not everything, but probably we will be looking into specific elements that will require a Francophone input. So I think that will be my best answer at this point of time. And later on, because of the overall, the city's direction is about inclusivity and diversity. So this may be an element that will be considered, in the overall direction. So.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. And I would really encourage you to do that for a lot of reasons. One is the accessibility, certainly, and inclusivity. And also, I think from an economic development standpoint, we're on the map, and let's continue to be as open for business en français, we'll see, okay? And my other comment or question is around communities of practice. In the request for decision, the term, but I haven't seen it here. It's on page 2 of the request for decision, the manual. The terms of reference for the community of practice provide direction for the policy. So in this context, if you wouldn't mind, Ms. Sangster, telling me what do you mean, or who is on the community, who is in the community of practice?
So the community of practice is it's an internal administration group that was established under the direction of the Deputy CAO in late 2019. And so it's composed of Beaumont administration staff. Right now, it has a membership of approximately 15 members of administration, and they represent a number of departments. So including planning and development, we have representatives from economic development, communications, GIS, and community services. And as part of the establishment of the community of practice, we've collaborated on a terms of reference as well that guides the work that we've done. The mandate is essentially to promote improvement of engagement practices among staff at the city who carry out those practices, and as well to develop and maybe systematize a little bit more the way in which we undertake those things.
Thank you very much. As you can see, I'm very glad to see this here. So thank you for your work on this.
Councillor Van Nieuwkerk.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question around community engagement and what we've asked of the community and what we've got back from the community to get to this point. If admin, Ms. Sangster, if you could speak to that a little bit.
Pardon me, just to clarify, as in, have there been engagement with community specifically on the revisions to this policy? Yeah,
you bet. Yeah, along the way, and we're to this point now. What have we asked of the community? What have we got back from the community? And if you could speak to what we've done to this point to engage the community.
We have not undertaken community engagement on this policy specifically.
Okay.
The intent, sorry, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll leave my subsequent, I guess, questions for the debate period, I suppose. Well, that's good for now. Thank you.
I'm muted. Councillor Munkoff-Swain.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate you, administration, putting this in front of us. You talk about the level of engagement. I guess the question I'm curious around is who determines that level? So I understand opportunities. The City of Beaumont will develop, implement the plan when we're proposing changes to policies, programs, etc. Could you just explain the process of, a project comes up, a policy comes up, and how does someone then determine, okay, this is gonna be input, this is gonna be listen and learn, this is gonna be inform? How does that, can you just walk through that decision process?
Mm-hmm. Certainly. It does, as you noted, Councillor, vary tremendously by project. The general framework that's laid out in the policy is one that is, it's almost sort of the international standard for participation, set out by the International Association for Public Participation. Essentially, when implementing it with regards to a project, one of the first things that we would do would really be identify the decision that is to be made or the issue that is to be engaged on, and consider in what ways input might be used to enhance that decision or to allow us to reach a decision that say is more equitable or more beneficial. We'd consider those questions, we'd consider who the stakeholders are and really work to identify those. And then based on the type of the decision to be made, the kinds of interests that we anticipate, who's going to be affected, we would look to choose a level of engagement for the project that would help us gather the information or communicate the information that we need to reach the best decision possible. So depending on the scope of input that stakeholders may have for the decision, there are some decisions where, for instance, we have legislative frameworks that we have to uphold. And so there are certain things that that external stakeholders and the public might not be able to influence. In those cases, there may be more of a role for level for say the inform level or the consult level, where there's less room there. But in areas where there is more scope for the public to influence the decision, we might look at having something that is more towards consult or collaborate, where we can work more closely with stakeholders on the decision at issue.
Thank you. And a follow-up, Chair, if you don't mind. So maybe I'll be a bit more direct. What role does council have in providing this? Do we have any role? The project comes up, at some point you guys develop a public participation plan. Is there a point where council reviews the plan and says, yeah, we agree that this should be inform, or no, this should be X? Like, is council involved in that process at all?
I may defer to Mr. Wong on that, just for a bit more perspective on kind of the process by which programs and projects are planned in the municipality.
I would believe the answer to that would be depending on the projects, because some of the administrations will undertake projects, but some may be council directed. So if that is the case, that is council directed projects, probably council would have a more involvement into even the design of the program, the design of the projects. But if it is something that is undertaking as a result of, for example, a very minor small one that administrations move ahead, then probably council would be in a lesser involvement. At the end of the day, some of the projects will go to council either for information or for approval. And there will be discussions with council, and council will then be able to provide input to the process. But I believe that the initial consideration of what level of involvement, what level of consultation, if it is council-directed projects, it will be a lot of heavier council direction will be given to the project team. But if it is more from the administration initiated, then it would be according to the project charter, and then the public participation plan and the public engagement plan that will direct the project team. And that project plan usually will be endorsed by the senior leadership team. So at that time, the senior leadership team will provide their input as well. So.
Yeah, I appreciate the answer. And the last thing you want is for us to be meddling in every single decision about what level it is, right? That we set the higher frame policy, I get that. But at some point, there's got to be a community interest portion that does have a political portion of this, right? And so, I just, without wanting to get into the next part of this discussion, considering how to maybe delineate that a bit clearer, so that council, set us up for failure, set us up for success as opposed to failure here, so that we know it's clear. Okay, these type of projects, administration is just going to go and execute, and we're following legislative process and blah blah blah. But if there are council-sponsored projects or large capital items, maybe during budget time or whatever, at some point, just try and consider a way that we can figure out how when we get involved in this, because that was the one thing that I couldn't see myself in it. I get we're setting the overall direction and the the scale, the IEP2 makes sense, but I couldn't quite see how reflective council would see themselves in this. And I don't want to get to a point where administration is going down a road and they choose to follow inform, and we're like, wow, man, we wish we would have weighed in. That we really think there should be consult, right? And so there is a fine line there, and it'll be a challenge to try and delineate that. But I think we just need to council needs to have a better understanding of what our role is in this.
For sure, yeah. The other way that I'm thinking about is also the working group, the community of practice. They are going to develop the manual, and the manual will be a little bit more in details because the policy will be providing a general direction from council. This is the way to go, but the manual will be developing a little bit more scenario based, for example. So to give examples on, okay, for under this criteria, you need to consider this, and on this criteria, you need to consider consultation rather than input, something like that. So that may be done at the manual stage there.
Yeah, because
come to council. Yeah.
Sorry, I think see Mike wanting to jump in here, but I think that's where it makes it real for folks is saying, okay, this type of project we're going to get a chance to say, oh, this type of project council is going to win or not, right? So and you say you're going to bring this back by the end of 2020 into a council for decision. I'd like to see if that manual would be ready to inform that discussion as well. So, yeah, I don't think we need to weigh in on that too much, but more just to help us inform of what we're actually looking for from the overarching policy.
For sure.
Mute. I still can't get the hang of unmuting. CAO Schwartz.
Yeah, I just wanted to build off of what Mr. Wong and Ms. Sangster were saying. I think we can build something in and something pretty simple. You talked about budget time. We typically have pretty robust discussions as we set the capital plan. Perhaps that's even in the absence of a manual. Well, once the manual gets in place, it would make it even easier let's have that discussion at that point, specifically around public participation and what council's expectation is. Because you're right, it may be a smaller project, but it may be so community sensitive that council wants to direct, a more robust participation policy. So I think it's a very easy fix to get you the input you need.
Yeah, so I would agree. And I'm thinking about Dowler's kind of one pager, right? And even just a little piece up the top, where do we think? And you guys will need to figure out whether you've been able to complete that participation plan or not, but maybe initial recommendation for us to comment on. So I appreciate the discussion. Thanks.
Okay, I had one quick question as well I'd like to ask regarding the RFD. Is it an RFD? See if I can find it. Bear with me, please, while I... Okay, on page... What page are we on? We're on page 3. There's a statement, a municipality makes the public participation policy available for public inspection and may post it onto the municipality's website. So that's a requirement of the Municipal Government Act currently. So my question was, is that all the public, is the public, is making the participation policy available for public inspection, is that covered by putting it on the municipality's website, or do we need to do more than just that?
My understanding, and I may need to check this with legal counsel as I'm not a lawyer, but if we post it on the municipality's website, the intention is that the public then can access the policy at any time. They can see what's contained within it, and so that should meet that requirement.
Okay,
my read of that is that. Sorry, go ahead.
That meets the statutory, as far as you're aware, that meets the statutory requirement?
As far as I'm aware, and I invite anyone with more knowledge of this matter to jump in on this if they so choose.
I think so, yeah, because like the Alberta regulations, the public participation policy regulation, section 3, it just said that the municipalities must make this public participation policy available for public inspection, and they post it on the municipality's website. So this section in our policy just to comply with the regulation.
Okay, thank you. So what do we do with the people who say, well, I want to see this, but I don't have access to the internet or whatever? How would we meet their need to see this?
A copy of the policy is always accessible through the legislative service. They can call the city administration, and we will be providing a hard copy or mail them, or they can come and pick up a copy. So it is always available.
Okay, so it's available on demand, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. All right, seeing no further questions, is a councillor willing to move the motion? Mayor Stewart.
So moved.
And I guess we should say it out in full, as it's. I'm sorry, as I didn't. So the motion is.
Motion is the Committee of the Whole receives a revised public participation policy as presented and recommend that the policy be forwarded to Council for approval.
Thank you. So, discussion on the motion. Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, thank you. Just moving down the train of thought to the question that I asked earlier around what have we done to engage the public up to this point on the public participation policy, and hearing that we haven't asked the public how they want to be communicated with. That's actually one of the things that I was most looking forward to with this policy. When I've talked and heard about the public participation policy in meetings and years past now, because it's been a long time coming, I was always anticipating that we would ask the public how they want to be communicated with. There are quite a few different means of communication, and one of the things I recognize listening to the first bit of conversation is that, you know, of the ways that you can be communicated with, it depends on the size, scope, and scale of what's going to happen, which, you know, some of those details are going to be included in the manual, which we don't have right now. And then I also noted that there's a comment in here that says a public participation plan will be made, you know, kind of subsequent to, it says the City of Beaumont will develop and implement a public participation plan when establishing or proposing changes to policies, programs, you know, those types of things. So I get that this policy is going to work hand in hand with a manual, and that the manual isn't available yet, but we want to, and we all know that we want to get public input along the way. But I guess my concern right now is that we've got this far and we haven't asked the community how they want to be communicated with. Just wondering if administration can speak to that a bit. Maybe there's something I'm missing here. I'm not sure.
Maybe I can fill in a little bit. Sorry.
Mr. Wong, yes, please proceed.
Okay, yeah, maybe I can fill in a little bit of the public input for the development of the initial public participation policy back in, even though it is a little bit dated, it is back in 2012 when the council approved the initial public participation policies. As you recall, basically at that time, the first policy was based on, prepared, and as indicated on the request for direction, at that time it was prepared by an external consultant and draw on the council's 2011 citizen satisfaction survey, and also they have the as part of the collaborative governance projects, you know. I don't have the details for those things, but there was an extensive public input so that the results from the survey, and I'm looking at actually back in 2018 when council ratified this 2012 participation policies, there was an attachment that provided the public participation, the result of that questionnaire. For example, questions were asked to the respondents about what activities do you consider as part of the town's current public participations. And 93% of the respondents said sharing information with the public. And the lowest was 39%. They said that implement solutions that are provided directly to the town by the residents. So basically, and as a spectrum. And then some of the other questions are on that survey, for example, was, does the town provide enough opportunities for the residents to be informed and provide input into the town initiative? And the response was 86% yes, and 14% said no. So some of the questions are how the residents are satisfied with some of the techniques that were available at that time. For example, on the website, on surveys, open house, and advisory committees and public hearings. So it was quite an extensive survey there. And based on that questionnaire, the survey, at that time, administration prepared the initial public participation policies. And the current policy that is in front of you today, we just make several amendments. For example, adding 2 guiding principles to the original 4, make it a little bit more, provide a little bit more clarity on the roles and responsibilities of different parties involved. For example, consolidating public and stakeholders into one called municipal stakeholders, those things, and elaborate on the spectrum of participations according to the International Associations of Public Participations, that is the 5 spectrum. And yes, a lot of the things will be delineated in the public engagement manual. But the manual is provided the tools and processes, and a lot of the tools and the processes will be project dependent, because there is not a one-size-fits-all. The manual will be the platform for the project managers and project sponsors to pick and choose and tailor design the appropriate public engagement programs. And that is why each project will have a public participation plan. There is not one participation plan for the entire city, but we have a public participation policy for the entire city, but each project will have their own public participation plan, delineating the timelines, the tools of using, and who are the stakeholders, and how do we best engage with the stakeholders, so forth and so on. So I don't know, I'm rambling here now. So
Yeah, I think for myself, just to put it simply, it feels to me like there's a piece missing, that we haven't directly asked the public how they want to be communicated with. And I know it's a tricky question to ask, because if you ask it online, the online people will respond. And if you ask it, if you go and do a survey of people, then, some people are going to prefer one form or another of communication, but it still feels to me like we've missed a piece. We're putting a public participation policy together, but we haven't explicitly asked the public how they want to be engaged with. So I'll leave it there for now. I'll be interested to hear what others might have to say about that and other things. Thank you.
Councillor Munkoff-Swain.
Yeah, I think Deputy CAO may want to jump in. She's got her hand waving. Maybe go to her if you don't mind, then I'll jump in.
How did I miss that? I don't see it at all.
She's waving like this.
Oh, okay. That's how I missed it, because I'm on speaker view and not on the grid. Okay, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chair.
CAO Mohammed.
Thank you, Chair. So I just want to clarify something, because I think it's getting a little confused. The intent of the public engagement manual is administrative, so it's not a council document. In that document are different types, like the categories in the policy of engagement that you see there. It offers different tools that could be used by administration for that. It's not something that you would run through council. However, that being said, there is a council governance manual being prepared, which could speak to the engagement piece in what council's role is in that. So it's very clear to council moving forward. There'll be engagement plans that are developed like what we've done in the past. So sometimes there's charters prepared, engagement plans. They're brought before council, and then council's asked, do you see any red flags with this? And it's your opportunity to say, I want more engagement on this, or, you know, roll this back or pay attention to this. So that's been our process so far. And I, unless, you know, we're instructed otherwise, I don't see that changing. But I think the government's manual really provides that opportunity. And as for asking the public how they want to be engaged, so part of the IAP2 spectrum that's provided there, it has all sorts of different tools of how you can reach out to the community based on, you know, demographics and who you want to target. So that's going to change every time, depending on who you're after in the community. Whether you're face-to-face or whether you're online or picking up a telephone or going door to door. It all depends on who you're trying to engage. But what I would suggest is that the city is in need of looking at a customer service strategy. And I think that's future work for us to do. And there's also the side of marketing that needs to be looked into as well in terms of targeting different areas of the community. And that might be more of where you would see the feedback of how to reach different citizens in the community.
Thank you. Councillor Monkhoff-Swain?
Yeah, thanks. I'll just quickly weigh in along that point. You know, when I looked at it, the policy, you know, it's not, well, I think what Councillor Van Nieuwkerk's getting to is, you know, what are the type of tactics that the community, how they want to be engaged. That this policy doesn't list out those tactics. It, you know, it just basically identifies the spectrum for how we're going to go in there. So I would agree with the CAO, Deputy CAO, sorry, about the need to ask that question and maybe through that customer service piece. But at a very high level, this is just a broader policy document that says, you know, this is the type of engagement that we're gonna, the method of engagement isn't in here. So I kind of rattled with that question as well, Councillor Van Nieuwkerk, but I think where I landed makes sense with the way the policy's got. There are only one small nitpicky thing that I want to address in this is just the word stakeholders. And so on page 6 of 10, roles and responsibilities, we call it municipal stakeholders. So just from an Indigenous perspective, you know, they obviously, you know, we're wanting to look at them and get their feedback. And the term stakeholder is not accepted in the Indigenous community. So, you know, whether it's municipal stakeholders and Indigenous nations or something to that effect, to make sure that we broaden the scope wider than just the term stakeholder. So just a small minor point that I'll leave with you guys to take away. But that's all I had. I'm in support of the motion that is being presented today.
Councillor Van Nieuwkerk.
Yeah, thank you. No, good discussion and good points from the Deputy CEO. I like what you're saying, and I understand the, you know, the different targeted means for the different demographics based upon what you're trying to find out. You know, if you want to know from this group, then you go here. If you want to know from that group, you go there. I think the thing I keep getting hung up on my head is like when you think about online engagement, you know, and someone says, okay, where am I going to find that? Well, go online to find it. Well, online can mean so many things anymore, right? It could be on the Beaumont webpage. It could be on the Beaumont Facebook page. It could be on Twitter. It could be a survey through SurveyMonkey activated through any one of those things. So, you know, a newspaper is a newspaper. That's straight up. You know, a survey when you walk into a building and talk to people, that's straight up. But one of the things that I don't know if we have a good feel on, and maybe Deputy CEO, you can help me feel better about it, is that we have a good handle on where we get the most meaningful responses to make sure that we're not missing people in online engagement per se. Could you elaborate on that a bit? I think you were almost there. Thank you.
Thank you, and through the chair to committee member Van Newkirk. So there is a process in terms of engagement that administration goes through, including evaluating and looking at who all the different stakeholders are, if it's Indigenous, you know, who the demographics are that are impacted by this project. And then it's ranked out and looked at how you're going to reach them. So say you were looking at the seniors, right? You're not going to find the seniors by reaching out through, well, at least not the majority, through Instagram. You're going to find them by going to them. And you'll get the most meaningful feedback by discussing things in person with them. Then if you go the reverse direction to the youth of the community, they have huge anxiety about talking on the telephone. So you would be better reaching out through different social media avenues and grabbing that demographic. So those are all the different things that go into the analysis of how to engage and come up with ideas. So the reason why you wouldn't see that in a policy is you want your policy to be enabling, to let you be able, like, here's the basic functions of where we stand with engagement as a municipality. But in the policy, you're not going to identify how for each group, because what if you want to try a new engagement technique that's come out, then you have to come back and change the policy every time. So you want that policy to be enabling, and maybe, you know, you have the wording that that engagement plans are prepared and reviewed by council. And then that's that opportunity to have that discussion. But every project has different nuances that's slightly different. You really want that flexibility in terms of what the engagement program is going to be, if it's a combination of online and in person, and you kind of evaluate that for each project. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's good, and for sure. I think for me, I can't wait to see the manual. I think and see how it fits together. The policy is going to give us the framework. And it tells us, you know, you do A, B, and C. And then already we're talking about how it could be integrated through the budget process and beyond. And it's, the policy says we're going to make a plan, right? So yeah, I get it. Thank you for that. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Just, Mr. Chair, just one clarification, sorry.
Of course.
I just want to be clear, the manual you're going to see is the council governance manual, not the engagement manual with the different engagement tools, because that's on the administrative side of things. So I just want to be...
Yeah, you bet. That's what I was referring to, is the manual where you said some of that can go in, because I think some of it'll fit nicely in there. So thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Raymond?
Hi, thank you, Chair. I just want to direct council's attention to something that was included within your agenda package, which was a link to the public participation guide that Beaumont has developed. And in there, it's this public on our website. It talks about what public engagement is. It defines public engagement, talks about everybody's roles and responsibilities within that process. It talks about different methods that we might use to engage with you, talking about what Inform is, that those are fact sheets, storyboards, direct mail, talks about how we're going to gather the input, how we're going to collaborate with you, what are some different things that we might use as techniques to engage with you so that you can know what to expect. You can find that on page 4 of that document. Then it goes on page 5 to talk about what level of participation should be chosen to give some idea to people and the residents, the public, about how we're developing public engagement. Public engagement requires us to go through a whole plan where you look through the risks and who needs to be consulted and all these different things that Deputy CAO and Mr. Wong and Ms. Sangster have already touched on. But one of the other things in here on page 6 actually talks about how we got to developing this guide. You know, as I talked about, it does talk about the techniques that we're going to employ, what level of participation should be chosen for these different things, talks about evaluation methods, feedback. but it also talks about the citizen satisfaction surveys that we have done in the past, which did ask the public how they wanted to be communicated with. Now, admittedly, the data that we've used is from 2017. As Ms. Mohammed did allude to, there is opportunity for us to go and get that updated, because I think a lot of things and a lot of context has changed since 2017, but a lot of that stuff is on there. So these details are within that guide that is more that public facing component that goes along with that manual. And we're happy to make any adjustments that council wants to see in there to make sure that we're communicating appropriately with the public. So just do want to draw your attention to that is part of your package.
Thank you. Yes, that's a worthwhile clarification. Councillor Munkoff-Swain, did you have a question?
That was just going to be a comment and a thank you to Ms. Raymond for pointing that out. I seem to remember this conversation, but I totally overlooked that link in the agenda package, and going through that as you were talking, that's everything that I needed. So I appreciate you flagging that, and apologies for not finding it earlier.
Well, I suspect you are not the only one there. Okay, thank you. Seeing no further requests to speak, I will call the motion. Will you please vote yes or no? So, I only see 6 votes. Who am I missing? Has everybody voted?
Munkoff-Swain has voted.
Councillor Munkoff-Swain, you haven't? Ah, there we go. Okay,
just checking your math there, mate.
Yeah, okay, so that's 7-0, so that passes unanimously. Thank you.
Right.
So I will look forward to seeing that manual, because I think that would illuminate a lot of this discussion more clearly, but I'll certainly check the page as well. Okay, that takes us to item 3B, the heraldry update. What do you have for us, Mr. Mackin? Or is somebody else going to present? Rob, can you hear me?
Just maybe give him a minute. Maybe just have him. Here he comes.
I have got the right item, haven't I? I haven't gone out of turn.
Correct.
Certainly. Sorry about that. Councillor Stout, my apologies. My computer had frozen there and I was just trying to unmute myself.
Happens to me all the time. Okay, so heraldry update, what do you have for us?
So Council, this evening I'd like to just provide an update. I know this project is near and dear, and it's been some time since we've come forward with an update, and I thought it was important to brief Council on the current status. So as you know, in September of 2019, we did receive notice that we'd been granted the armorial bearings from the Canadian Crown under the powers exercised by the Governor General. So in your package, you see the standard elements of a traditional coat of arms. We've included that just for reference. To date, we've gathered a number of pieces of information and provided it to the Heraldic Society. This information is being gathered from the Beaumont District Heritage Society, as well as others to provide to them as they develop our herald, our emblem. So they obviously, in light of where things have happened since COVID, there's been some challenges to timelines and next step. But we wanted to make sure that Council knew that this was still moving forward. So developing the preliminary artwork can take a number of months with the Heraldic Society. So because of the current COVID pandemic, it's impacted their timeline significantly. So any artwork we may be getting from them has been delayed at the moment. Also, they've come back with a number of options and points of consideration for what the final artwork could look like. Because the Herald emblem for community is so important and it has such a legacy component to it, there's a real importance to make sure that we engage the community broader to get feedback and to ensure what the end result really speaks to the unique character of Beaumont. So therefore, we're looking now at this next stage to engage those larger groups in the community to go out and get feedback and get some dialogue going with the options that the Heraldry Office has provided us. So we're looking for council support to engage the community, to get some further input in how best to make the final product. And all of those engagement and that next steps of communication will definitely include council to inform you of when those efforts will be. But we wanted to let you know that that in light of the efforts with them taking times to review the information, getting the approval, now COVID, and now coming back with some questions and some considerations for us, there is a process here, and we're working through it. We're looking to engage the broader community at this stage, and we're just looking to see if council has any questions or any comments around this at the moment.
Thank you, Mr. Mackin. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Okay, seeing none. Essentially what you're saying is that we've been delayed partly by the COVID outbreak, that we would be further along in the process, but for that. Is that correct?
For the most part, yes. There was a transition between an individual internally here with some changes, but we picked it up and we immediately reached out to the Heraldry Office. They've been great, but it does take months, even in light of before a pandemic. It does take them several months to review the information, do their own research, and do the artwork. So we're at the stage right now before we commission artwork, which would be really a waste of effort if we don't make sure the right elements are included in that artwork. So that's where we're at today, Councillor Stout.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, this was a project that it was my notice of emotion that initiated this. So happy to see it coming forward and anxious that it proceeds as quickly as we reasonably can. I just wanted to add a comment for Council's general edification on the importance of the symbology. The example that you gave is actually a real grant of arms. It's the town of Penhold in Alberta. It's a grant from 2004. And there are a bunch of elements in there that give you an idea of the importance of the design. You'll notice that it's illustrated in the agenda package. You'll notice, for instance, that there are two quill pens, which is what they've used for Penhold as a symbol, because apparently this was the result of a railway clerk's pen arriving on this point in the map originally. There's a strip down the center representing the railway, which is important to the development of the town. And within that strip, there's a piece of fur, which is actually originally a heraldic representation of squirrel skin stitched together, but in this case, it's being used to represent the grain elevators that stood in the center of Penhold. There's a coronet, apparently made out of bricks. That's called a mural coronet. It's a symbol of the municipal jurisdiction, with a falcon on top of it, which represents the RCAF base that was there, and there's a mule deer either side of the shield representing, well, partly because it's in the county of Red Deer, but it's also a commonly observed animal in those parts. Anyway, the reason I go through all that is because that's how they incorporate all the symbology into the history and community of the municipality that they're trying to represent. And yeah, in order to do the same thing for Beaumont, we have to go through the stages that Mr. Mackin has just suggested and make sure that we get everything right, that we're representing the town and the various communities and the history properly and fully in a condensed symbol like that. So I am willing to move this, seeing no, oh, there is a request to speak. Councillor Danlock, did you have a question?
Yes, Chair, just briefly, thank you. Mr. Mackin, how do you envision the public engagement going forward in the sense that there are 7 elements identified in the coat of arms? Were you perhaps envisioning asking our public to suggest what they think the crest should be comprised of, or the wreath, or the helmet, and so on? Are you suggesting we should have some suggestions already in hand to have them expand upon? What are your thoughts on that process, please? That's all.
Thank you. Through Councillor South to Councillor Daniluk. The Heraldic Society provides those sorts of recommendations based upon their research and information they've gathered. So it's not necessarily a blank slate, but when they do come back and provide a couple of considerations, it's at that stage where we want to make sure that we are hearing the community, getting that feedback. A key example is we know we've got a very strong Indigenous roots and background in this area. We also have a strong Francophone history. How do we represent that while we're also such a young and vibrant growing community? So they provided some considerations for us, not a blank slate, Councillor Daniluk, but it's those considerations that we want to make sure we tap into the groups that can best speak to and confirm, validate, and stand behind the crest.
That would make sense. I'm assuming that with the French background, the fleur-de-lis will probably be a pretty easy one to put on there in some way or form. Obviously, with the French connection, that's a very, very French symbol. So, okay, thank you for expanding on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All right, I am willing to move motion 3B. Oh, I have just blacked out. Excuse me. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry. For a moment, my computer there appeared to be offline. So I am willing to move the motion where is the motion? I've got to get quicker on this. That the Committee of the Whole received the City of Beaumont heraldic emblem coat of arms update as information. Is there any discussion on the motion? Councillor Barnhart? Oh, no. You were... Okay, in that case, seeing no discussion, request for discussion, I will call the motion. Please vote yes or no accordingly. And that's 7-0 again, so that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Which brings us to the next item, item 4, closed session. I would like a motion to move into closed session, please. Who is willing to make that motion? Councillor Barnhart.
So moved, Your Worship. Sorry, not Your Worship, your council committee chair.
It felt good hearing it said there. Okay. Call the vote on motion to move into closed session. Please vote yes or no. And that passes 7-0 as well. So unanimously, we will move into closed session. Welcome back to those watching online. We are now out of closed session and there are no items arising from the closed session. So I will move right along to item 5, which is councillor inquiries. Are there any councillors wishing to make an inquiry at this time? Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, thank you, Committee Chair. Just a question through to administration regarding the subdivision development in Forest Heights. I'm just hoping to get a update on the progress that's in Forest Heights relative to the commitment made by the developer in the public hearing, which we recently had, and some of the concerns that residents have brought forward in the last 48 hours or so. Just wondering if administration could provide an update. Thank you.
Sure. I'm going to see if we had sent out a pretty detailed email before this meeting. You may or may not have gotten it. Ms. Raymond, are you available? to weigh in? Thank you.
Hi. Greetings, committee. So CAO Schwartz indicated we did send out a fairly detailed email on this matter. So we have been receiving some inquiries both from council and from residents regarding the status of the development of what's known as Forest Heights Phase 9. That is the latest stage of development that's adjacent to north of Triumph, west, east of Glenberry Meadows there. There have been some removal, stripping and grading taking place in this area and removal of trees in this location, especially in the southern portion that's adjacent to Triumph Estates, which I know has caused people to feel very passionate about their trees and stuff like that. So just wanting to make sure that the amount of trees that were being removed was the correct amount. So just wanted to provide you with some background information. In May, we held a public hearing to adjust the outline plan. At that public hearing, it was moved by council to adjust the area of the treat area to protect a little bit more. So we removed one lot from the southwest corner of this, which I'm going to refer to as the wedge, because right now the trees literally do look like a wedge. So it's probably for the best that I could describe it that way. That was carried forward to the subdivision. And the plan and the outline plan did reflect those changes that were requested by council. We also requested in the outline plan and made some amendments talking about no trail being proposed to the southern portion of the tree stand along the west boundary of the neighborhood. As we talked about at that public hearing, to build a trail necessitates the removal of a lot more trees than just what is within that trail right away. You do have to remove significantly more. And it's likely we probably would have lost the west tree stand as it stands today. They've had, the subdivision was approved on July 2nd, and they received a stripping and grading permit for this area on July 2nd as well. City administration staff did meet on site with the developer's contractor to review what was the plan in regards to the trees being removed. They have been marked. There is an attachment that was in here in the email there, but it did show the extent of where the trees would be removed and where they would stay. As mentioned, a significant portion of trees are being protected on the west side, but you will notice that more trees have been removed south adjacent to Triumph Estates. There is a trail that will connect to the existing paved trail in Triumph, so we necessitated removing 6 meters worth of land to be able to build a 3-meter asphalt trail to connect into the neighborhood. Some of the different options that we have going in front of us would be that we're going to be working with the developer to see what reforestation can occur in this area. The other option is that the city also is able to undertake naturalization of this area, or it's a combination of the two. You'll recall at the public hearing, the developer did commit to replacing trees that were lost during this. I do recognize that we do have mature trees in there, but a lot of them were also dying. We had a lot of wet trees, as you'll recall from earlier in the year, which was suffocating the existing tree stand and its roots. There's some black poplar in there that's got a lifespan of about 20 to 30 years. They're not long-lived trees. So we did need to get in there to clear that out and for the health of that tree stand to maintain that, also so that it's not a fire hazard. So we have been working on that. We continue to work with that on the developer. We have been in touch with residents in that area. Operations has been on site, planning's been on site. We've all been taking a look at it, but the trees that have been removed are in accordance with their plans that they had indicated. And it's mostly to facilitate the grading of the site and to allow for proper development.
Thank you. So what I'm hearing is the commitments that the developer has made remain intact. Is that true?
That's correct.
Okay. And then administration is, we'll have a look at replacing and, putting some more trees in and, making it more treed, I guess, in the future. As long as that commitment is there, I think that's helpful as well. I guess what I can say is that I understand the process we've went through, and but I also sympathize with the residents a lot. The day that you have a tree stand behind you and then the next 2 days later you don't is is a lot to absorb. And it's one thing to see it on a piece of paper, but to see a machine back there doing it is pretty impactful. So thank you for the effort that admin has put in there. I know administration has been very attentive and has got out to site, and that's been appreciated. So thank you for that update. That's all from me for Councillor Inquiries. Thanks.
Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Chair Stout. Last week I had an opportunity to participate in the Women in Politics group that has been meeting at the call of Councillor Essinger in Edmonton. And there were a number of communities represented, a number of the regional municipalities. And one of the issues that came up pretty strongly, understandably with the COVID response, has been the increasing awareness of the effect it's having on our residents' mental health as well as physical health. And it's leading me to ask the question, and I miss our regular updates, CAO Schwartz, because it was there that we had an opportunity, and you don't need the extra work, so I'm just saying that because it was great information to have. But without those updates, I'm kind of left wondering if we have any idea of residents' impact in terms of their mental health. And I would imagine FCSS is fielding those calls and perhaps dealing with it in some ongoing way, which we've heard some of that, but I haven't heard anything recently, which doesn't mean I may not have been kept up with everything. So apologize for that. But I guess my question is, are we hearing any upticks in the numbers of people requiring counseling or support or anything of that order? I know anecdotally of some stories that I know about from the different communities, but and ours included. And I'm just wondering if you have anything from the administrative point of view. And I apologize for not giving you a heads up on this before asking you the question, and fully understand if you need to get back to us at a later date.
And part of that answer would be that, unless Eleanor can weigh in, because I've been away for the last couple of weeks and just got back yesterday. I will say, because I met with municipal enforcement and RCMP today, and it's basically the same as I reported in my last weekly update, that it's almost a business as usual for them, a typical summer as far as crime and domestic calls and so on. We did see the uptake at the beginning, but it's kind of leveled off to business as usual. But I haven't had the chance to have a conversation with Ms. Williston. I'm going to look over at Eleanor. And Eleanor, do you have any more information on that? Otherwise, I will certainly get back to you on it.
Thank you. FCSS has been hosting workshops on anxiety and also working with the youth. The youth workshops have been fairly interesting. They have quite a bit of anxiety coming in and seeing people in person and making sure that things are socially distanced. In conversation with the FCSS last week, there is an idea and an intent, very early days at this point, to do some sort of engagement campaign in the fall that addresses mental health and gets the information out there of where people can go to get help. So not just like our FCSS contacts, but the broader contacts and services available through the province, and just getting word out there, because they are aware that a lot of people are really struggling right now.
If I could just add on to that, one of the other very specific issues is with school starting. Just in talking to people, you want your kids to go back, but at the same time you're afraid and you don't know if you're doing everything right. Should you keep them online? Should you, so that is causing anxiety, of course, in the parents and maybe the children as well. So yeah, anything we can do to support that, I'm certainly behind you all the way on that. Thank you for the information.
Councillor Hendricks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Today, Parliament of Canada prorogued to September the 23rd. And just wondering what the impacts that may or may not have on the city of Beaumont by way of financials or otherwise. There seems to be a whole host of things connected to potentially this proroguing. And I was hoping just to get some feedback, maybe at another time. It's early news, but what that may or may not mean for Beaumont.
Sorry, Councillor Henderson, I didn't get the first part of that.
Sorry, the federal government prorogued Parliament until the 23rd of September.
Right.
So we're getting a new finance minister. There's a whole series of programs that seem to be now being put on the shelf until they sort things out. I think we're in the mix as far as some of the monies that we're supposed to be finding their way through the federal government, through the provincial government, through to us. So just wondering if there was just a quick update on what you may or may not think impacts us.
Yeah, great question. And we're going to have to do some research. I see today that they announced the finance minister. I did read that they had prorogued the House. So we're going to have to do some digging and find out what that impact is, and definitely report it back to council.
Thank you.
Councillor Danlock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question to our CAO. I'm not looking for an answer today. Next council meeting would be sufficient for some feedback. But an update, please, if we could. We did approve in the capital budget for this year 2 additional outdoor rinks to be constructed, hopefully in this calendar year. With a partnership with our friends over at Bowman Amateur Hockey Association. So we get an update, if we could, next council meeting on the status of those 2 additional capital projects and see where they're at in the scheme of things in terms of planning, please.
Yes, we can certainly do that. Again, I've been out of the office for a couple of weeks, but the last conversation I had with Paul is that things were on time. And if I recall, the tender may be out or just about to go out, but I'll certainly get an update.
That's a very good first start. Thank you very much, Mr. CEO. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all I have for this evening.
Okay, thank you. All right, seeing no further requests or inquiries, I will move us to item 6, which is information items. Is there anybody wishing to speak to information items?
Where are you now? You're over there.
Councillor Barnhart?
I apologize. I hope that council did see the information, the name of the new executive director for Leduc Regional Housing Foundation. That information was sent out to the mayor and the CAO, and I don't know if it's come out in correspondence yet. I haven't got through everything. But Margot Haggerty is moving to our region, and she previously worked in long-term care, very large responsibilities in Calgary, in the Calgary area, in the city of Calgary. So we're not looking forward to our Nancy Lang leaving us, but we are looking forward to welcoming a new executive director to the Housing Foundation. So I just wanted to make sure you're aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to provide an information item? Seeing.
If I could, once council's finished.
Yes, of course. CAO Schwartz.
I just wanted to say a couple things around COVID. We're now at 2 active cases and 12 recovered. So we've had another recover in the last couple of days. I know myself out and about the community, I'm seeing a really good indication. People are abiding by the mask bylaw. I'm seeing specific efforts around physical distancing. So I just wanted to recognize that. I know it's been a tough go here the last week, specifically around masks, which is a very, in my opinion, an emotional and political topic. But overall, the behavior in the community, in my opinion, has been outstanding. And just want to thank everybody for that, and for council for making a really tough decision. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was recently in Jasper for a couple of days, where there's a blanket mask bylaw on even walking down the main street, and it was interesting to watch observance there, which was almost universal as far as I could see. Anyway, moving on. Any further inquiries? Any further information items required? So that takes us to item 7, emerging issues. Is there anybody who would like to raise an emergency issue? An emerging issue. I have to be careful with my wording there.
No.
No. All right, then that brings us to seeing none, that brings us to item 8, adjournment. Time now is 6:34. Do I need a motion to adjourn? No. In that case, I'm going to declare us adjourned at 6:34. Thank you very much for your participation and good evening.
Good job, Martin.